Hello and welcome. Let's have an honest conversation. Are you doing everything your doctor tells you for your diabetes? Watching your diet, taking your medications, checking your numbers, but you still feel, drained? Do you feel like you're fighting this battle with one hand tied behind your back and the fatigue, the nerve pain, or the brain fog just seems to be getting worse? What if I told you that for millions of Americans just like you, there's a hidden reason for this struggle? Groundbreaking new research, including a massive review of over 52,000 people published in the prestigious journal BMJ Nutrition, Prevention, and Health, has revealed a staggering fact. Nearly half of all people with type 2 diabetes have significant deficiencies in essential vitamins and minerals. It's a condition some experts are now calling hidden hunger. For too long, we've been told to just accept these worsening symptoms as a part of the disease, or just a part of getting older. I'm here today to tell you that this is not the whole story. You have more control than you think. In the next 25 minutes, we are going to uncover the 10 most common and damaging nutrient deficiencies that could be sabotaging your diabetes control. More importantly, we'll give you a powerful, practical toolkit of strategies to start fighting back, reclaiming your energy, and taking back control of your health. This is the information your doctor might not have the time to discuss in a 15-minute appointment. The problem we're tackling today is something researchers call the double burden of malnutrition. It sounds complicated, but it's actually quite simple. It means you can be managing a diet-related disease like diabetes, focusing so hard on the big things like carbohydrates and sugar, while at the same time, your body is silently starving for the tiny micronutrients it needs to function properly. It's like trying to build a sturdy house with only half the nuts and bolts required. The structure might stand for a while, but eventually, things start to wobble. Our goal today is to shine a bright light on this issue and empower you with the knowledge to address it head-on. The information we're sharing isn't guesswork. It's based on solid research from respected sources like the Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, and studies published in major medical journals. We're connecting the dots between the latest science and your daily life. You'll definitely want to stick around for number 3, which is directly linked to one of the most common diabetes medications in the world. And the number 1 culprit? It affects a staggering 60% of people with type 2 diabetes, and understanding its role could be a key to unlocking better blood sugar control. And of course, a quick but very important reminder. I am not a doctor, and this video is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Think of this as a guide to help you have a more informed conversation with your personal healthcare provider, who knows your unique health situation. Never start or stop any supplement without talking to them first. All right, are you ready? Let's begin our countdown. All right, let's kick off our countdown at number 10 with a powerful antioxidant you may not have heard of, alpha-lipoic acid, or ALA for short. Now, why should someone with diabetes care about ALA? It all comes down to a process called oxidative stress. Think of it like rust. When you have high blood sugar over time, it creates a kind of rusting process inside your body. This rust is particularly damaging to delicate structures, like your nerve endings. This damage is what leads to the painful tingling, numbness, and burning sensations of diabetic neuropathy. What makes ALA so special is that it's a unique kind of rust-proofer. Some antioxidants, like vitamin C, only work in the watery parts of your cells. Others only work in the fatty parts. But ALA is a superstar because it can work in both. It can get into every nook and cranny of your cells to protect them from that oxidative damage. And while more research is needed, small studies from trusted sources like the Mayo Clinic suggest that it may help ease those very symptoms of neuropathy. I think of my neighbor, Carol. She's a lovely woman in her 70s who described the feeling in her feet as walking on crumpled up aluminum foil. Her doctor had her on medication for the pain, which helped a bit, but she still felt it constantly. Learning about the role of oxidative stress gave her a whole new perspective. It wasn't just about masking the pain anymore. So what's your action step here? You can start by focusing on food sources. Your body makes some ALA, but you can also find it in foods like spinach, broccoli, yams, potatoes, and red meat. If you are experiencing neuropathy symptoms, this is a perfect topic to bring up with your doctor. You can ask them, "I've been reading that an antioxidant called alpha-lipoic acid might help with diabetic nerve pain by reducing oxidative stress. Could this be relevant for me?" Now for the red flags. This is very important. According to the Mayo Clinic, you should not take ALA supplements if you are deficient in vitamin B1, also known as thiamine. Heavy alcohol use can increase the risk of a thiamine deficiency. Taking high-dose ALA in that state could have serious side effects, including seizures. This is precisely why a conversation with your doctor is not just a good idea, it's essential before you ever consider a supplement. So we've talked about protecting our nerves. Now let's move on to fueling our bodies at the most basic level. That brings us directly to number 9. Coming in at number 9 is Coenzyme Q10 or CoQ10. You've probably seen this one on the shelf at the pharmacy, often in the heart health aisle, and for good reason. It's absolutely essential for creating energy inside every single cell in your body. Here's the simple science. Think of each of your cells as having tiny little engines called mitochondria. These engines are what turn your food into the energy that lets you walk, think, and live. CoQ10 is the spark plug that makes these engines run. Without that spark, the engine sputters. In people with diabetes, this energy-making process can become less efficient, which is one of the reasons for that deep, bone-weary fatigue that so many people feel. I once read about a man named Frank, a retired mechanic in his late 60s. He understood engines better than anyone. He was so frustrated because, as he put it, his get up and go had got up and went. When his doctor explained CoQ10 in terms of being the spark plug for his body's engine, it just clicked for him. He understood that it wasn't some magic pill, but a fundamental component to make sure his engine was getting the spark it needed to run smoothly. Your body does produce its own CoQ10, but those levels can decline as we get older and with certain health conditions. You can find it in some foods, particularly organ meats like heart and liver, fatty fish like salmon, and in smaller amounts in spinach and broccoli. If you happen to be on a statin medication for cholesterol, you may have already heard about CoQ10, as some research suggests it might help ease the muscle pain that some people experience on those drugs. This is another excellent conversation starter for your next doctor's visit. But here comes the critical safety warning. If you take a blood-thinning medication like warfarin, which also goes by the brand name Jantoven, you must talk to your doctor before even thinking about a CoQ10 supplement. The Mayo Clinic warns that CoQ10 can make blood thinners less effective, which could increase your risk of a dangerous blood clot. This is non-negotiable. Please, talk to your doctor. From the spark plugs in our cells, let's move on to another B vitamin that plays a surprisingly big role in how our body handles sugar. This brings us to number 8. At number 8, we have biotin, also known as vitamin B7. Many people associate biotin with healthy hair and nails, and it certainly plays a role there. But for someone with diabetes, its most important job is deep inside your cells, acting as a master activator for your metabolism. Think of your body's metabolism like a giant, complex factory. For that factory to run, you need workers to flip switches and turn on the machinery. Biotin is one of those essential workers. It's needed to activate key enzymes that are involved in processing glucose. In other words, it helps your body properly use the sugar from your food. When you don't have enough biotin, some of those switches don't get flipped, and the whole process can become sluggish. I like to think of a woman named Susan, who always felt like her body's factory was running on low power. She was eating right, but still felt slow and bogged down. Learning about biotin's role was like realizing that a few key light switches in her factory were turned off. Giving her body the tools it needed helped get the assembly line moving again. Your action step here is to focus on biotin-rich foods. The good news is they are delicious and easy to find. Top sources include beef liver, eggs with the yolk, salmon, pork chops, nuts, seeds, and sweet potatoes. Now for the red flags. Because biotin can help lower blood sugar levels, it's very important to be careful if you are already taking insulin or other medications that lower blood sugar. Combining them with high-dose biotin supplements could potentially cause your blood sugar to drop too low, a condition called hypoglycemia. This is why any plan to supplement with biotin, especially in higher doses, must be supervised by your doctor. From a helpful B vitamin, let's turn our attention to a major mineral that has a direct and powerful effect on your body's insulin production. Coming in at number 7 is a mineral we hear a lot about for heart health and blood pressure, potassium. But its role in diabetes is one of the best-kept secrets in nutrition. The science here is surprisingly straightforward. If your potassium levels are too low, your body may actually make and release less insulin. And as we all know, less insulin means it's harder for sugar to get out of your bloodstream and into your cells, which can lead to higher blood sugar levels. In fact, studies show that people with low potassium are more likely to develop type 2 diabetes than those with normal levels. Let's imagine a man named David. He was in his late 60s, diligently taking his blood pressure medication, but he couldn't understand why his blood sugar numbers were slowly creeping up, even though his diet hadn't changed. It wasn't until his doctor made the connection and checked his potassium levels that they found the missing piece of the puzzle. His medication was doing its job for his blood pressure, but it was also causing him to lose this vital mineral, which was impacting his blood sugar control. So what's the action step? Focus on food first. Wonderful sources of potassium include dried fruits like apricots and raisins, bananas, winter squash, spinach, potatoes, broccoli, beans and lentils, and even chicken breast and salmon. The red flags for potassium are important because you can have too little or too much. Symptoms of low potassium, called hypokalemia, can include tiredness, constipation, and muscle weakness or cramps. On the other hand, high potassium or hyperkalemia can also be dangerous, especially for the heart. This is why you should never, ever take a potassium supplement unless it is specifically prescribed and monitored by your doctor. From a major mineral like potassium, let's zoom in on a trace mineral that acts as insulin's most important partner. At number 6 on our countdown is chromium. This is a trace mineral, meaning your body only needs it in very small amounts, but its job is mighty. Its primary role is to act as insulin's little helper. Here's the analogy. If insulin is the key that unlocks your cells to let sugar in, chromium helps to polish the lock. It functions by enhancing the action of insulin. It's thought to bind to a special molecule that helps activate the insulin receptors on your cell membranes, making them more sensitive and responsive to insulin's signal. When your cells are more sensitive, they can pull glucose out of the blood more efficiently, which is exactly what we want. Here's a fascinating twist. Studies have shown that diets high in simple sugars, the very things we're told to avoid, can actually cause your body to lose more chromium in your urine. So, it's a double whammy. The foods that spike your blood sugar the most are also depleting your body of a mineral it needs to handle that sugar. I think of a baker I read about who, despite his best efforts, was struggling with insulin resistance. The realization that his love for sugary treats might be actively working against him by flushing out this key mineral was a real eye-opener. Your action step is to ensure you're getting chromium from your diet. Excellent sources include whole grain products, broccoli, nuts, green beans, beef, and turkey. For the red flags, outright chromium deficiency is considered rare. However, caution is key with supplements. The American Diabetes Association actually suggests that people with diabetes should avoid chromium supplements if they are taking insulin, metformin, or other diabetes medications because of an increased risk of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Furthermore, people with pre-existing kidney or liver disease should be especially careful, as high doses could pose a risk. Once again, this is a conversation for you and your doctor. Okay, let's just pause for a moment and take a breath. We are officially halfway through our countdown. So far, we've uncovered the roles of alpha-lipoic acid for protecting our nerves, CoQ10 for firing up our cellular energy, Biotin as a key metabolism activator, potassium as a partner in insulin production, and chromium as insulin's helper. The big theme that's emerging here is that managing diabetes is about so much more than just counting grams of sugar. It's about reducing that rust of oxidative stress, protecting our cells from damage, and making sure our body's internal machinery has all the tools and helpers it needs to work properly. These are all things that you can influence. And by the way, if you're finding this information valuable and empowering, would you do me a quick favor and just tap that like button below? It's a small click for you, but it tells YouTube that this is important information, and it helps other people who really need to hear this message find our community. Thank you so much for that. Now, are you ready for the top 5? This is where we get into the real game changers, the most common and impactful deficiencies of all. Let's dive in. Kicking off our top 5 is vitamin E. Many of us know vitamin E as an antioxidant, and that's exactly why it's on this list. It acts as a guardian for our cells. Remember that rusting process or oxidative stress we talked about with ALA? High blood sugar generates these damaging molecules called free radicals that attack our cells. Vitamin E is what's known as a chain-breaking antioxidant. When a free radical attacks the fatty membrane of a cell, it sets off a destructive chain reaction. Vitamin E steps in and breaks that chain, sacrificing itself to protect the cell wall. This is incredibly important in diabetes, where this cellular damage is constant. Studies have shown that having adequate vitamin E can play a role in improving long-term blood sugar control, measured by HbA1c, and improving insulin resistance. It may even help delay the onset and slow the progression of diabetic complications. Think of your body's cells like little houses with walls made of fat. Vitamin E is like a dedicated security guard patrolling the perimeter, stopping vandals before they can do any real damage. Your action step is to get vitamin E from your food, which is much safer than high-dose supplements. Fantastic sources include nuts like almonds, seeds like sunflower seeds, and dark leafy greens like spinach. Now for the red flag with vitamin E, and please listen closely to this. This is one of the most important safety warnings in our entire countdown. People with diabetes are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop heart disease, and many are prescribed blood-thinning medications like warfarin to prevent blood clots. Studies show that high-dose vitamin E supplements can interact with these medications and reduce your body's ability to form clots even more, which dramatically increases your risk of serious bleeding. If you are on any kind of blood thinner, you should avoid vitamin E supplements. Get it from your food and talk to your doctor. From a general cellular guardian, let's move to a mineral that has a very specific and critical job in your pancreas. At number 4, we have the mineral zinc. Zinc is a true master regulator in the body. involved in the function of over 300 different enzymes. But for our purposes, its most vital role is in the pancreas, the home of your insulin-producing beta cells. Here's a great way to think about it. Zinc is like the head librarian for your body's insulin. It plays a significant role in helping the pancreas properly manufacture, store, and release insulin. Inside those beta cells, zinc helps insulin molecules form into stable crystals, so they can be stored safely and efficiently in little storage granules, ready to be released the moment you eat a meal. If there isn't enough zinc available, or if the zinc transporters aren't working right, this whole elegant process of storage and release can break down. This dysfunction can lead to more inflammation and oxidative stress, which, as we know, can worsen diabetes and its complications. I think of a retired office manager I read about who spent her life making sure everything was filed correctly and organized efficiently. The idea that her own body needed zinc to properly file and organize its insulin supply just made perfect sense to her. It motivated her to make sure she wasn't overlooking this crucial mineral. The action step is to be mindful of zinc in your diet. Oysters are famously packed with zinc, but more common and accessible sources include red meat, poultry, beans, nuts, whole grains, and fortified cereals. The red flags for zinc deficiency can be tricky because they often overlap with other issues. But be on the lookout for things like unexplained hair loss, wounds that seem to take forever to heal, getting sick more often than you used to, a loss of your sense of taste or smell, or even skin rashes that look a bit like eczema. If you're experiencing a cluster of these symptoms, it's absolutely worth mentioning to your doctor. The fact that a simple mineral can have such a profound effect on your body's most important hormone is incredible. And that leads us to number 3, where we'll see how a life-saving medication can sometimes cause a deficiency of its own. All right, we've reached number 3, and this is a big one that affects millions of Americans managing diabetes. We're talking about vitamin B12, and this one is especially critical if you take one of the most prescribed diabetes drugs on the planet, Metformin. Here's what happens. Metformin is a fantastic first-line medication for type 2 diabetes, but research has shown for decades that taking it for a long time can interfere with your body's ability to absorb vitamin B12 from the food you eat in your intestines. The prevalence is significant, with some studies showing that nearly 30% of people taking metformin have a B12 deficiency. Now, here is the most important part of this story. Look at the symptoms of a B12 deficiency. Profound fatigue, muscle weakness, tingling or numbness in the hands and feet, often called neuropathy, and even memory problems or confusion. Do those sound familiar? They are almost identical to the common symptoms and complications of diabetes itself. A person and their doctor could easily assume that these feelings are just the diabetes getting worse, when in fact, it could be a completely separate and treatable vitamin deficiency caused by the very medication meant to help. I remember a story about a woman named Margaret. She'd been on metformin for over a decade and was so frustrated by her constant tiredness and the pins and needles feeling in her feet. She was convinced her diabetes was just winning the battle. It wasn't until a new, younger doctor decided to check her B12 levels that they found the real culprit. After getting B12 supplementation, Margaret said it was like a heavy fog had finally lifted. She still had to manage her diabetes, of course, but she was no longer fighting that debilitating exhaustion on top of it. Your action step here is clear. The American Diabetes Association actually recommends that people taking metformin should have their B12 levels checked periodically. So, take a look at your medication list. If you are on metformin, brand names can include Glucophage, Fortimet, or Glumetza. I want you to ask your doctor at your very next visit, could we please check my vitamin B12 levels? I understand that my long-term metformin use can affect it. As for food, B12 is found almost exclusively in animal products, meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and dairy. The red flags for B12 deficiency are the symptoms themselves, especially if they are severe. If you experience extreme fatigue, muscle weakness, a sore and red tongue, mouth ulcers, problems with your vision, or a noticeable worsening of numbness and tingling, don't wait for your next annual checkup. Call your doctor. These can be signs of a serious deficiency that can lead to permanent and irreversible nerve damage if it's left untreated. The fact that a helpful medication can inadvertently cause a deficiency highlights just how interconnected all of our body's systems are. That leads us directly to number 2, a mineral that's involved in over 300 of those systems and gets caught in a dangerous cycle with diabetes. We have arrived at number 2, and folks, this is a huge one. It's the mineral magnesium. While vitamin D gets a lot of the press these days, magnesium deficiency is incredibly common in people with diabetes. Major analyses show it affects over 40% of people with type 2 diabetes. The relationship between magnesium and diabetes is what scientists call a vicious cycle. It works like this. First, you need to understand magnesium's job. If chromium is insulin's little helper, magnesium is the foreman on the construction site, overseeing hundreds of critical jobs. One of its most important jobs is helping your body's cells respond to insulin. Think of the insulin receptor on your cell as a lock. Magnesium helps that lock work properly. When your magnesium levels are low, that lock gets rusty and the insulin key doesn't work as well. This, my friends, is the very definition of insulin resistance. Now here's the other side of that vicious cycle. When you have high blood sugar, as is common in unmanaged diabetes, it makes your kidneys work overtime, and they end up flushing more magnesium out of your body in your urine. So let's put it together. Diabetes can cause you to lose magnesium, and losing magnesium makes your insulin resistance worse, which in turn makes your blood sugar even harder to control, which causes you to lose more magnesium. It's a downward spiral. Think of a gardener, let's call him George. He couldn't figure out why his blood sugar was so erratic, and to top it off, he was getting terrible, painful leg cramps at night. He was eating what he thought was a healthy diet, but no one had ever mentioned magnesium to him. Once he learned about this vicious cycle and started consciously focusing on magnesium-rich foods, not only did his blood sugar become more stable and predictable, but his nightly leg cramps completely disappeared. It was the missing piece of the puzzle he never even knew he was missing. The good news is, you can break this cycle. Your action step is to load up your plate with magnesium-rich foods. Think of the good stuff: dark leafy greens like spinach, nuts like almonds and cashews, seeds like pumpkin seeds, and plenty of beans and legumes. To give you an idea, the single ounce of pumpkin seeds contains nearly 40% of the recommended daily intake of magnesium for a man. The red flags for a more significant deficiency can include loss of appetite, nausea, fatigue, muscle spasms or tremors, and even abnormal heart rhythms or palpitations. If you are experiencing any of these, especially anything unusual with your heartbeat, it's time to call your doctor. And just like with potassium, if you have any kind of kidney disease, you must be extremely cautious with magnesium supplements, as your body may not be able to get rid of any excess. We've seen how this vicious cycle can make diabetes so much harder to manage. And now, it's time for our number 1 culprit. This is the single most common deficiency found in people with diabetes, and its impact goes far beyond what any of us used to think. And here we are at number 1. The single most common, most widespread hidden nutrient deficiency that is worsening diabetes for millions of Americans is vitamin D. The numbers are truly shocking. A massive global analysis found that over 60% of people with type 2 diabetes are deficient in the so-called sunshine vitamin. Some studies have found that rate to be as high as a staggering 80%. For decades, whenever we heard vitamin D, we thought about calcium and strong bones. And while that's absolutely true, it's only a tiny part of the story. We now know that vitamin D acts much more like a powerful hormone in the body, and one of its most important jobs is to calm down inflammation. As we've learned, chronic, low-grade inflammation is a major driver of insulin resistance. So, by helping to lower that inflammation, having adequate vitamin D levels can help your body use its own insulin much more effectively. It's like trying to listen to a radio station filled with static. Inflammation is the static. Vitamin D helps to turn down that static so your cells can hear insulin signal loud and clear. Let me share a powerful example from a recent study that really brings this home. Researchers looked at a group of older people who were in the hospital with diabetic foot ulcers, one of the most feared complications of this disease. What they found was remarkable. The lower a person's vitamin D level, the more severe their ulcer was. In fact, the people with the least severe ulcers had more than double the vitamin D levels of those with the worst, most advanced ulcers. This strongly suggests that vitamin D is absolutely critical for tissue health, wound healing, and immune function, all of which are top priorities in preventing the most devastating complications of diabetes. So, what is your action step? The best source of vitamin D is, of course, sensible sun exposure on your skin. But that can be very difficult for many of us, especially in the northern states during winter, or if we have mobility issues or skin cancer concerns. Food sources like fatty fish, fortified milk, and fortified cereals can help, but it's very difficult to get enough from diet alone. This is one case where testing is absolutely key. Your action step is to ask your doctor for a simple blood test to check your vitamin D level. It's called a 25-hydroxyvitamin D test, and it is the only way to know for sure if you are deficient. In this case, the red flag is the diagnosis of diabetes itself. Because the deficiency is so incredibly common in this group, you should assume you might be at risk and ask for that test. Please, do not supplement blindly. Getting the dose right is important, and it should be guided by your doctor based on the results of your blood test. And that's our top 10. From alpha-lipoic acid all the way to vitamin D, we've uncovered a hidden world of nutrition that has a profound and direct impact on how you experience life with diabetes. So what do we do with all this information? Let's tie it all together. As we've seen today, tackling diabetes effectively isn't just about counting carbs or taking a single pill. It's about seeing your body as a whole, interconnected system. The 10 nutrients we've discussed are like a team of essential workers. When they don't show up for their shift, the whole operation starts to break down. Your insulin doesn't work as well. Your cellular energy factories begin to sputter. Your delicate nerves become vulnerable to damage, and a vicious cycle of inflammation and oxidative stress can take hold. The most important message I want you to take away from our time together today is this: you are the chief executive officer of your own health. This knowledge gives you power. It gives you new, intelligent questions to ask your doctor. It gives you new, simple strategies to try in your own kitchen. It shifts you from being a passive patient, simply receiving instructions, to being an active, engaged partner in your own care. You have the power to address this hidden hunger and give your body the tools it needs, not just to survive with diabetes, but to thrive. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 points was the biggest aha moment for you? Was it the surprising link between metformin and vitamin B12? The vicious cycle of magnesium? Or the shocking prevalence of vitamin D deficiency? Please, take a moment and share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience helps our whole community learn and grow together. If this deep dive was helpful, and you want more empowering content to help you live a healthier, more vibrant life, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the little notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Remember, every small positive step you take is a victory. Here's to your health, your vitality, and your independence. I'll see you in the next video.